2025 Big Ten Head Coach Power Rankings. Here's how we're going to do it. I'm going to throw up 6 coaches at a time, and then we're going to look at the whole darn thing when all is said and done. We want to start at the bottom, and we are going to work our way to the top. Here are coaches 13 through 18, and let's start at the bottom. Now, I put Barry Odom at 17, ahead of Deshaun Foster at number 18, because Barry's just got more experience as a head coach. You look at what he was able to do these last couple of years at UNLV, some of the best seasons that they've ever had down there in Vegas in that Runnin' Rebels football program. I think that deserves some credit. And Barry Odom was a head coach over there at Missouri. He had a couple of bowl appearances as the head coach of the Tigers over there in the SEC. I really like Barry Odom. Whatever they define success as at Purdue going forward, I think Barry certainly can get them there. You look at Deshaun Foster. Like, he had one season as a head coach, and they went 5-7. They failed to make a bowl game. Before this, all Deshaun was a position coach. So you can maybe understand why he's still, like, I don't love putting Foster at 18 because I really like what he did. UCLA continued to fight and fight and fight, and I think Deshaun Foster deserves a lot of credit because there was a stretch in the middle of the season that was very, very difficult for him, but he kept these guys focused. You know, that big Friday night win against Iowa I thought was really big for UCLA this season, but I've got him at number 18, Barry Odom at number 17, and then we work our way up to Mike Locksley at number 16. I think he was at number 11 in my 2024 head coach power rankings, and he's getting towards the bottom here because what is Mike Locksley outside of Taulia Tagovailoa? We saw this program take a pretty drastic step down this past season in the first Mike Locksley season of no Taulia Tagovailoa over there at quarterback. Like, one game that really stuck out to me for Locks this past year was just getting absolutely hammered on a Friday night against the Northwestern Wildcats. If you lose to Northwestern 23-20, hey, so be it. But not showing up against that caliber of football team is inexcusable. He's kind of very, it's a little bit confusing to try to evaluate him right now because Maryland is doing crazy stuff on the recruiting trail. Like, they could pull in 2 top 5 overall players in this upcoming 2026 recruiting class, but will Mike Locksley be around to be able to develop those guys or see those guys step foot onto campus at the University of Maryland? That's something that I think needs to be talked about. This thing might have peaked at an 8-win season. I got Locksley sitting there at number 16. I've got David Braun at 15. Remember, this is a Big Ten Coach of the Year we're talking about, and Northwestern is a very difficult place. I've said this before. Northwestern is a very difficult place to sustain success. It is near impossible to win 7 games every year, to win 8 games every year. When we look at Pat Fitzgerald, okay, he would win 7, 8, 9 games. He would drop down to 3 or 4. He'd win 8 games. He'd drop down to a 4-win season. Every other year, it seemed that Pat Fitzgerald and Northwestern would really pop up and have a really good season. And I think that's what we're really forming into, certainly with David Braun. He had a really good year a couple of years ago. That first year, the interim tag fell off. He became the permanent head coach. Last year took a little bit of a step down. The quarterback just didn't work out, whether it was Jack Lausch, whether it was Mike Wright. They're hoping that Preston Stone this year is going to be able to be better, but I've got David Braun sitting there at number 15. This is a big year to really determine which way that he's going to go with that Northwestern football program. All right, folks, let's get spicy. Here's maybe my first hot take, and I've got Luke Fickell. Yes, the guy that I had number 6 in last year's head coach power rankings, is the biggest faller of them all. He's down 8 spots to the number 14 spot in these Big Ten head coach power rankings. Luke Fickell came in. He stole the soul of Wisconsin football, and he has not returned the favor. All right? This is a program that is not in a better spot. I know that it was trending down when Paul Chryst was fired, certainly. But 2 years in, there's not a ton of optimism. There's not a lot of positive direction, certainly at Wisconsin. I think one thing, and I'm going to talk about this when I talk about other coaches, one thing that a head coach that's underrated, and I tend to evaluate a head coach on, is coordinator hires and assistant coaching hires. Major, one more time, major miss with Phil Longo. When I talk about stripping the soul of Wisconsin football, really the offensive identity, this team has had no identity the last 2 years with Phil, because what do we know with Wisconsin? Run the football, 2 tight ends, great offensive line. Like that's Wisconsin football in a nutshell. And then they try to open up the offense a little bit, and it certainly hasn't worked. I talk about the hamster wheel. They just keep going around and round. They're not getting really any traction as a program, and the schedule this year is not doing them any favors. Luke Fickell tried to come into Wisconsin, change things a lot, and it just hasn't worked. Wisconsin established a formula of what works and what is successful. They're trying to get back to that with Jeff Grimes coming in as the offensive coordinator. I think he's going to be a little bit more physical. I think he's going to run the football a lot more. But where this program, Wisconsin should not be sitting where they're at right now. I thought Luke Fickell was a good hire when he came to Madison. You kind of look at his track record. His track record is succeeding in a Group of 5 conference, which would, with a team that would eventually become a Power 5 team in Cincinnati. He hasn't done it at the Power Conference level. We'll see if he can do it here in the coming years at Wisconsin. Maybe I'm a little bit more tough on him because Wisconsin being a team that I like. Jonathan Smith at number 13. He's actually down 3 spots from last year. And I don't love bringing him down 3 spots, certainly, because what do we know about Jonathan Smith? Jonathan Smith is a builder. They had a 1-win improvement from the last year. But when I look at Michigan State, they had a rough finish to the season. When you have kind of a younger team and a newer team, I think you want to finish strong, right? Hey, maybe the first couple of games are a little bit rough, but hey, you really want to finish the season on a good note. I thought this team had what it took to win a bowl game, and they failed at doing that. Like, they barely beat Purdue by 7 points, their second to last game of the season, and they just got utterly crushed by Rutgers at the end of the season as well. And I think there's guys that I think I'm a little bit more confident in above them right now. But once again, you talk to me 3 or 4 years down the line, Jonathan Smith could be maybe as high as like 7 or 6 on this list. We know it is a slow developmental build with a Jonathan Smith football program. All right, let's go and talk about coaches number 7 through number 12. Now, I've got Jedd Fisch at number 12 ahead of Jonathan Smith, and I'm going to explain why here in just a minute. But with Jedd, I had him number 12 in the 2024 Big Ten head coach power rankings. He didn't change because he did exactly what I expected him and the Washington Huskies to do last year. They were a handful of teams that I was exactly right about the regular season prediction. I predicted them to go 6-6, and they ended up going 6-6, certainly last year. Jedd Fisch, Jonathan Smith, both first-year head coaches, both coming over from the Pac-12 at programs that needed a little bit of rebuilding. Jedd got to the bowl game. Jonathan Smith didn't. When I take a look at the near future, I think I like Washington a little bit better. Like, I love what they have a quarterback in DeMond. Hey, another young quarterback at Michigan State, and Aiden Childs certainly as well. But I think considering that Jedd got a little bit further in year one, and I kind of like the trajectory a little bit more of the Huskies over the Spartans, that's why I've got Jedd Fisch sitting there at number 12 right now. Let's talk about Sharon Moore at number 11. I thought Sharon Moore learned a lot in year number 1 as head coach. He was number 13 in my 2024 Big Ten head coach power rankings. But when he started the season, it was a little bit rough. They were changing quarterbacks every other week. They were trying to really figure it out on the fly. Once we got to late October, once we got to November, Sharon Moore was like, all right, we're Iowa. That's what we are. We have bad quarterback play. We have good future NFL players on the defensive side of the ball. We can run the football. We need to accept who we are. Hopefully next year we're different. And I think in 2025, they certainly will be a little bit of a different football team. But we need to accept who we are, and we need to play into that. And that's how we need to really form our game plans. And it got a lot better, I think, once Michigan really adapted to who they were and really the window that they needed to be able to look through, so to speak. They finished the season better than anybody. Ohio State win, the Alabama win, the flip of Bryce Underwood, the number 6 recruiting class in the country. This is a team that's carrying all kinds of momentum in 2025. It takes a lot of maturity. It takes a lot of growth as a head coach to be able to work through what Sharon Moore and Michigan worked through last season. And I think this season they're poised to maybe have a 9 or a 10-win season in Ann Arbor. Let's talk about Greg Schiano sitting there at number 10. Now, he's down one spot. He was at number 9 in last year's power rankings, sitting there at number 10 right now. Now, there were some other guys below him that certainly deserve to jump all the way up. So maybe that's a big reason why he's jumping back one spot. But I know there were some injuries last year on defense for Rutgers, but I thought the defense really underperformed last year considering the amount of experience that was coming back, certainly. But this is just a guy that knows how to succeed at a place like Rutgers. It's going to be really tough to evaluate somebody like Greg Schiano. Like, what would happen if he were the head coach at Penn State? What would happen if he were the head coach at Ohio State? I'm not sure how successful he would do with more talent, but I think he's just in a really good position to get a lot out of a little. Like, he's one of those coaches in the Big Ten that is going to get everything and develop every little ounce of potential that there is out of each and every one of those players. I think he's a really good coach and obviously a great fit for Piscataway, New Jersey. And they're bringing in a really good transfer class coming up this season as well. Let's move on to number 9, Matt Rule. He's down 2 spots from last year's Big Ten power rankings. Now, I get it. You had a young quarterback. You had a true freshman quarterback. Now, I get it. There's going to be some ups. There's going to be some downs that go with that. But I still thought Nebraska underperformed last year. Nebraska was inconsistent. Like, I think there's 2 highs and 2 lows from the Huskers last season. That Colorado win was certainly a high in what they were able to do, getting that monkey off their back and how dominant that they were in that game. And then you look at how they performed in that game against Ohio State. Like, those were 2 good coaching performances for Matt Rule. And then you look at what happened in that loss to UCLA. Yes, I know Dylan Raiola got hurt towards the end of that game, but it should have never been in that situation to begin with. Okay? He did not have his team ready to go for that matchup against Deshaun Foster and the Bruins on that particular afternoon. And then just getting absolutely throttled, having a 50-burger thrown up on the board against the Indiana Hoosiers. Look, I know Indiana was a fantastic Big Ten offense, but Matt Rule just did not have his team ready to play. Plain and simple in that game against Indiana. So I think there was a little bit of inconsistency. Rule sitting there at the number 9 spot. We talk about guys that are developers of talent. Does anybody make more with less than PJ Fleck? All he does is get the bowl games. All he does is win bowl games. You look at how this team has developed a secondary over time. They look like they're very much on that way with Coy Parrish and Kerry Brown back there at safety. And Minnesota, I think, is really in position to do a lot right now going forward in 2025. PJ he was at number 8 in my 2024 rankings. He's sitting there at number 8 in 2025. There could be a case to maybe move him up a spot in these rankings, but I feel really good with him sitting there at number 8. He's like, you put him, I think, at a higher level program, I think he would be a little bit more on the map than he certainly is, right? Like, Minnesota, not a easy place to win. And he's been consistently like 7-win seasons, like 8-win seasons. When you have people within the Minnesota media kind of saying, well, they won 7 games and they feel like they left some food on the table, that's when you know things are certainly looking up with PJ at the helm of the Golden Gophers. Number 7, I got a lot to say about this one. Number 7 is Lincoln Riley For some reason, I put him at number 2 in the 2024 head coach power rankings, but he just continues to take steps down. 7-5 regular season, and now a 6-6 regular season within his first year coaching in the Big Ten Conference. Last year just screamed and slapped subpar coaching in the face for me when it came to Lincoln Riley. Like, I look at multiple games. It wasn't just one game, multiple games. There was times when the run game was clearly working. Woody Marks was a 1,000-yard back, their first 1,000-yard back, I believe, since Ronald Jones. So the run game was clearly working. There'd be point in times during the game where he would just abandon the run game. He would try to get Miller Moss to go back there and certainly make some plays down the field, and that's where USC kind of started to fall off and started to get behind in some of these football games as well. You've got close games, an overtime game against Penn State. You've also got a 1-point loss to Maryland. Like, you've got a 1-point loss here. You got a 2-point loss here. You got a 3-point loss here, but it's not only against good teams. It's against good teams, but it's also against bad teams, which tells you what? Which tells you that they're playing basically the same level of football against different levels of competition and different levels of teams, which means that this team, they're not adapting. They're not changing. I know that they changed quarterbacks towards the end of the season, but this is a team that, and a head coach in Lincoln Riley, that really wasn't able to adapt that well to some of the things that were happening throughout the season. I've got him at number 7. I think there's a possibility for a case to be made that he could maybe be even lower, but hey, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt of his past with developing quarterbacks and the success that he had over there, but at Oklahoma, but that's becoming more and more of a distant memory as time goes by. This season, big year for Lincoln Riley going forward. Let's head to my top 6. At number 6, I've got Curt Cignetti. We knew about his past. Every place that he had been to as a head coach, he made it much better than he found it. And I think that's going to be the case when all is said and done, when the finished story is shut, when we talk about Curt Cignetti's time in Indiana. It already might be that way after an 11-1 season and a berth in the college football playoff. I think this past year, what happened at Indiana was really clarification of his previous head coaching stops, because I think the reason why I had him ranked so low going into last year, I saw the potential. I saw what he was able to do, but he just hadn't done it at this level. Now that he's done it at this level, it really certainly makes me think more of Cignetti overall when you really factor in his entire resume as a head coach at this level. I love what he does with roster building, the whole production over potential. This is a team, it's hard to recruit. Hard to recruit to Indiana, I think, at the level that they want to be at, especially after 11-1 season. So the transfer portal is going to be a big tool for Indiana football going forward. I love their roster for 2025. I think the roster in 2025 could be almost as good as it was in 2024. And I think that's a lot of credit to the philosophy and the direction that Curt Cignetti has this program going. Now, a couple of times already in these rankings, we've talked about head coaches that do a lot with a little. Is there anybody that does that better than Bret Bielema? This man was put on this earth to do one thing and one thing only: coach Big Ten football. I had him ranked in the double digits. I had him ranked low last season because of that down year in, what would that be, 2023. I thought in 2022 they probably should have won the Big Ten West, left some food on the table, but man, what Bert did this past season, I thought was very impressive, getting this team back on track. And then when you look at what 2025 looks like, people are talking about Illinois as a college football playoff dark horse. They're talking about maybe back-to-back 10-win seasons at Illinois. People already forget just the program Illinois was before Bret Bielema came to Champaign. We're talking about Tim Beckman. We're talking about Lovie Smith. We're talking about 3-win seasons. We're talking about 4-win seasons. We're talking about a 5-win season being a step in the right direction. Bielema has come in here and in less than 5 years has turned Illinois into a really good football program within the Big Ten. This guy deserves to be in the top 5. I think considering his past with 3 Big Ten championships over at Wisconsin, I think he's one of the more underrated head coaches in college football. When we talk about great head coaches, you need to talk about Brett Bielema. It should be no surprise to anybody that these things are happening at Illinois. Number 3 and number 4 were constants from my 2024 Big Ten head coach power rankings, like the just consistent success of Kirk Ferentz year after year, decade upon decade at Iowa. I think he deserves some credit. I know he was maybe pushed into it a little bit with the AD to get rid of Brian Ferentz and have to hire a new offensive coordinator, but he had to hire a new offensive coordinator. I thought he picked a good one. I thought Tim Lester was a really good selection as OC. You could certainly see the offense start to take strides up last year. I think they're going to continue to take strides up, as an offense this season in 2025. As long as Phil Parker is the DC, they're going to be fine. They play consistent level of football, like 8 wins. When you're this past year, when you're looking at 8 wins, it's kind of like type of season at Iowa. You know you're certainly in a good spot. I thought about maybe putting Bielema ahead of KF. I think those two are closer than some people think, but I've got Ferentz in that number 4 slot. James Franklin. All right, there's going to be some people out here that say, well, he can't win this game and he can't win that game, and that's true. He has had difficulty winning significant football games, but all he does is win 10 games. There's a lot of other people out there that cannot consistently win 10 football games and play at the level that James Franklin continues to produce at Penn State. Like, the narrative surrounding Franklin is that he wins all of the games he's supposed to, but he can't win those elite level against those elite level teams and those elite level football games. I think there's something to be said, and I think it should certainly take into account that this team does not falter when they play a lesser opponent. I've talked about some coaches already on this list that maybe sometimes play down to their competition. James Franklin is always prepared. In those football games, he is never taken by surprise, and I think James deserves a lot of credit for that. Do they recruit at the absolute highest level? Maybe not. You know, there's still a top 10 recruiting program, like a top 15 recruiting program, but they develop really good players into the NFL. James Franklin he's right on the precipice. He's right on the precipice of being a great coach in college football. Like, he beats Ohio State this year. They win the Big Ten. Maybe they make a run for a national championship. And we're talking about James Franklin, I think, in a very completely different light. Don't glance over the fact that all this guy does is wins the football games. At number 2, I've got the Danimal, Dan Lanning, right now. All he did his first year in the Big Ten Conference is trot in, win a lot of games convincingly, and win the Big Ten Conference as a whole. When people think of Dan, they're probably going to put that Rose Bowl and they're going to put that on a pedestal and say, well, look at this. And I get that and I understand that, and I'm sure he's going to use that as a little bit of motivation going forward. But the thing with Dan is he just gets better year after year after year. He started out, he could not beat his rivals. 3 consecutive losses to Washington. Of course, you had that loss to Oregon State in 2022, but he's certainly taken care of that over the last couple of years. And following a 13-1 season where they won the Big Ten, imagine where he can continue to climb on this ladder right now. You had Oregon where they were under Mario Cristobal, no doubt about it. Dan Lanning is taking it to another level in Eugene. He recruits almost better than anybody. We've got back-to-back top 5 classes in Eugene, Oregon, certainly right now. There's a lot of resources at Oregon, no doubt about it, but he takes advantage of every single one of those resources. He is still under the age of 40. He is still learning things. I think considering where he's at in his career, he's certainly on a good track to be one of the best head coaches in college football for a long period of time. And you got to talk about Ryan Day. You got to talk about Ryan Day as the number 1. Just won the national championship. He was number 1 on my Big Ten power rankings last year. When we talked about resources with Dan, we got to talk about resources with Ryan Day right now. They recruit on an elite level, especially at the wide receiver position. They develop at an elite level. They've got really good coaches across the board. Even when you lose Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles as your coordinators, you have a guy on staff in Brian Hartline that they've been able to kind of keep around, and now he's the offensive coordinator. You go out and get a guy like Matt Patricia that it sounds like a lot of guys around that building really like right now. Ryan Day, I think, with the national championship, you can say what you want about those games against Michigan, and I totally get that, and I'll totally hear that, but I don't think there's really any other choice for the number one head coach in the Big Ten Conference right now. Final rankings, here's what it looks like, 1 through 18. When you got a guy like Fickell at 14, Jonathan Smith at 13, even like a Grace Schiano at number 10, you know that you have a very healthy and strong list of coaches in your conference.